All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining. I can see a good number of participants out there, and the two presentations were, of course, extremely interesting. Thanks for that. Perhaps just for context sake, I must share a little bit about RSGT. Red Sea Gateway Terminal is a terminal operator based in Saudi Arabia, and we have been operating the single largest terminal in Jeddah Islamic Port since the last 10 or 11 years now. And indeed now with the total capacity of 5.5 million TEU, then the single largest terminal on the Red Sea coast. I have, you know, chosen to take a slightly different focus to my presentation here, given also my role, which is a slightly non-operational role and more investment focused, but I'll get on with that soon. But perhaps I must just share that these are unique times, and we have been, of course, affected in the same way as so many of you and our colleagues in the wider port industry. We at RSGT, much like other port operators in the region, but also globally, have had the opportunity, but I guess also the challenge of maintaining business continuity and service continuity, given that a port is an essential service, and doing all of this in these unique circumstances while keeping our customers and colleagues safe. So there has been a lot of learning, a steep learning curve indeed. Back in January, we did not really think this would happen by this time, but here we are. So we've had a very steep learning curve, all of us. We've had an additional challenge at RSGT in that, and as some of you might have read or know, that in December of 2019, we had signed a concession agreement with the Saudi Port Authority to take over the North Container Terminal in Jeddah Islamic Port, which had a operational takeover timeline of April 1 this year. And as the uncertainty unfolded around us, obviously it became increasingly challenging, or perhaps more challenging than we had anticipated, to take over the North Container Terminal on April 1st. But we are proud of having done so successfully without a glitch, all thanks to our colleagues and their exceptional planning around it. Like I was saying, since my role is non-operational, it's more investments and transactions focused, and I look after business development and the investment strategy for RSGT, then I've decided to take a slightly different focus to my presentation topic, which is more around investments and opportunities that this crisis might create for all of us going forward. This is no doubt valid for the Middle Eastern region, which is the specific region we are focusing on today, but perhaps also valid for the port industry globally. So you will see that perhaps my topic is a little more global in nature in that way. If I can try and switch to the next slide, and I wonder if it happens simply by pressing enter. No, it did not. I see. Okay. So I believe you can all see slide 2 now, and I've tried to visually give the participants a feel for how we have thought around this current situation, and what are some of our assumptions and some thinking around what are the new investment opportunities that might emerge out of as a result of the current market environment. So if I can take you through this little visual to give you a feeling of what we have been thinking. We all know what the current market environment is. There is uncertainty around what this really means, how will the recovery look, and so on. And everybody is half an expert in that already, so let's not go there. But what we for sure know is that there is a downturn. We are in the midst of a serious downturn, which is probably going to stay with us for a while. And this might mean that some of the single terminal operators or small portfolio operators might feel the financial stress of it. And especially given the fact that since the last financial crisis in 2009, the port space and transactions within the port space have been done at relatively high prices and multiples, which has meant that the entry prices that these operators have paid in the last 10 years are quite significant. So some of these operators or assets might consider exiting the business or partnering up with other operators or other investors to tide over this financial stress that they may be feeling now or perhaps will feel in the coming days, instead of being caught in a situation later and paying the price for misguessing how strong the economic downturn would end up being, or what would be the eventual shape of recovery. So we do feel that some of these assets or operators might want to come out and partner up, and we are starting to see some evidence of that indeed. What we also feel this crisis might result in is some of the fiscally stressed countries with high volumes of debt might perhaps be pushed towards prioritizing their resources away from infrastructure building, especially for those countries who have believed in operating their ports themselves. So this crisis might create the potential for them to partner up with the private sector and go for further infrastructure development and operations, certainly within the port space, in partnership with the private experts in the industry. And we also feel that given the crisis and depending on how long it lasts, then some of investor types such as shipping lines, commodity houses, private equity players and such, who might have made investments in the port space, which is not exactly their core, might decide to financially and operationally deleverage by placing these opportunities back onto the market. And as a collective result of all of this, we are what we predict is the surfacing of some new investment opportunities. If I can then move on to slide 3, which perhaps sets the scene for why is it that some of what we covered in the last slide might become true, and at what changes to the past. So that is a confusing slide. So let me try and decipher this for you. These various jiggling lines that you see there are basically enterprise value to EBITDA, basically multiples that some of these key port operators have seen in the last 13 odd years. And it covers the last financial crisis, how they went down and how they went back up and recovered and stayed at relatively high levels throughout up until 2019. But if you see on the right side of the slide, some of these operators have started to see dips in these multiples already, which I guess is the ingredient needed for more M&A activity in the space. So I think we would see some of that in the coming period. And we feel that companies who have managed to come into this period with strong liquidity, access to resources, shall be well positioned to gain market share. Part of the reason why we feel that there might be an uptick in M&A activity in the port space is because, as compared to the previous 10 years or so, there is potentially good reason for why some of these transactions might happen at more reasonable entry prices. So again, too much information on the slide. I'm sure you'll get access to these slides. You can go through it later. But if you look in the left side, we have put some select port deals that happened between 2013 and 2020 around the world, and you will see some information about enterprise value to EBITDA multiples there, and deals were done anywhere between 16 times EBITDA to 20 times, 27 times EBITDA, which are obviously expensive entry prices. So those were the market levels then, nothing wrong with it. But on the right side, as you can see, Some port companies that we've chosen not to name, but these are mostly listed entities, have seen a significant drop in their in their market caps and in their valuations in the last 4 or 5 months alone. Nothing surprising, because the markets themselves have taken a strong beating, and they are part of the market. But this does lend itself to the argument that valuations might become more affordable as we go forward. That's all I had. I just want to wish those of you who celebrate Eid Mubarak, and I have put my contact details there. If there are any questions, that I would be very happy to take under the guidance of Steve.